First and foremost, thank you everybody for showing up. This is fine. We'll do it ourselves. The online roundtable discussion for Native filmmakers presented to you by the First Nations Film and Video Festival Incorporated. First Nations Film and Video Festival Incorporated is an organization that puts on two film festivals a year, November 1st through the 10th and May 1st through the 10th annually at locations across Chicago. And I think the only one in Chicago, or at least Illinois, that deals directly with Native filmmakers directly. And as you can see evidenced here today, we have plenty of Native artists here with us. My name is Ernest Whiteman III. I'm a co-director of Northern Arapaho. I'm a filmmaker myself, artist, writer, and media educator. And we're happy that people can join us today in watching this roundtable discussion via Zoom. And I want to thank each and every one of the filmmakers here that are here for taking the time out. I know how busy everybody is. And like I said earlier, it is a small miracle that we were able all to meet at this point in time. Moving on, we're going to have all the filmmakers introduce themselves, and I have them in alphabetical order by last name. So it'll be Ramona, Joseph, Sarah, Michelle, and then Shelly introducing yourselves. So just introduce yourselves, name, tribe, what you're doing.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ramona Emerson. I am a filmmaker here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm also a writer. And that's basically it. I run a production company here in Albuquerque with my husband, Kelly. And right now I am working on my second novel, and I'm also trying to wrap up 4 documentary projects. So that's me.
If you can add where you're calling in from, that would be awesome as well.
Oh, I am coming in from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
God, Joseph Daguado. I'm Joseph Herb. I'm a filmmaker and I guess educator and animator. I'm a professor, an assistant professor at the University of California, Santa Cruz, but I'm calling you from the capital of Cherokee Nation, Tahlequah, today. I'm just happy to be here with everybody.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Hennigan. I'm a Cherokee filmmaker, calling in from the University of Mississippi, where I'm an assistant professor of film production.
Michelle Hernandez. Hi, my name is Michelle Hernandez. I am from the Wiyot tribe. I currently reside in Los Angeles, but I am a film, or I guess a director, writer, producer, and I run my own small production company with my husband.
Hi, I'm Shelley Nero. I'm Mohawk Six Nations, living in Brantford, Ontario. That's where I'm calling from. I'm a director, writer, producer. Yeah, I put on all the hats.
And we're all glad you do. Thank you for, again, just showing up and being here and taking time to help maybe discuss this. I don't know if it's a controversial topic or even that sensitive, but it is something that's very common in Native filmmaking circles. And I just wanted to sort of like talk about it. And I know right now it seems prescient with, a recent release of a recent film. And but this has been in the sort of like FNFVN agenda for a while. And when we first discussed having this online series, this is one of the topics that was really brought up. And this is like about 2 or 3 years ago. So, and it just came up in the queue randomly. And I'm going to talk really quick about the reason for this. As a film festival that deals directly with Native filmmakers, we do get a lot of non-Native entries. We get about 250 entries per festival, and less than 10% of those are of Indigenous filmmakers. So they're from all over the world. They see a free entry film festival and they just enter it automatically. And some are Native themed, I would say. And over the years, we've had to sort of come up with a way of communicating with the non-native director about why their native theme film didn't fit our film festival. And because our guidelines are very, very simple, it's, you know, it can't be more than 5 years old and it has to have a Native American as the director. Mainly because we felt that a lot of the creative control, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but a lot of the creative control falls in the hands of a director. And I think the Hollywood system sort of proves out this auteur theory as well. But so we've gotten a myriad of responses about why we didn't accept their film. And maybe about a third of them were sort of accepting and, you know, very understanding of it. The other 2/3 are really sort of like they didn't care. The 1/3, and the other third is basically outright, you know, hostility about why we didn't accept their films. A most recent example I can think of is a film about the political climate in Central America. And one filmmaker was making a film about a village that was sort of like in the crossfire of political armies. One of them being the Zapatista, you know, and even though he wasn't a native filmmaker, we didn't include his film on the program, and he responded very emotionally about why. And this is why his responses to why our reasoning was what sort of really why we came up with this idea for this discussion. Because his idea was that it was, he admitted that he wasn't native, and but he felt that it was up to him to tell the story of this village, to sort of get their voices heard, and which is fine and good, but the way he put it was, he literally said he was their only hope of them getting their voices. And I questioned what he was actually doing for the people of the village other than filming them. Was he like sort of like teaching them how to make film so they can, you know, create these things for themselves? But he kept insisting that it was up to him. And when we said, well, you know, regardless of your intention, your film is not a Native American film because you're not a Native filmmaker. And then he really got upset, called us a racist film festival, and then that's where he left it. And I didn't deign to respond to that because I didn't feel like, you know, perpetuating that sort of discussion further. But that gave me this idea of there's a lot of that out there, and a lot of it is very subtle, and a lot of it is very systemic about, you know, who is the authority over our stories. And this is something that, you know, the film festival has always had to try to tackle with. And myself, in my own experiences, had to try to explain to a lot of non-natives about why the director has to be native. And so can any of you sort of call to mind sort of an incident sort of like this, or just your general thoughts on the idea of sort of a non-native director, sort of not necessarily exploiting native grief, but sort of taking that authority out of native hands?
Well, it sounds like he's upset because he's not being regarded as the white savior that comes in and is giving them their voice, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that, you know, there are Native film festivals that really want to have Native films. And I think it's important that, you know, we support those film festivals, because if I go to a Native film festival and there's non-Native director or writer, I think it's not a Native film. It's a white film, you know, and they will definitely have opportunity to have their film seen. Like, you know, if it's a good film, it'll be seen. But I think that when there's a Native Film Festival out there, I think that it should just be Native films, because there's becoming more and more, and the quality is getting better and more interesting. And we're going to be fighting amongst ourselves who's going to get out there and having our films seen. So I think that, yeah, he'll have his say somewhere down the road.
Well, not only that, but there's still a real problem with funding sources like Vision Maker Media and PBS. I mean, they're actively funding non-Native people to tell our stories still. And so, like, I've been part of the jury process on that side. I've also been a grantee. And I could write a book about how many times I've had to deal with this in New Mexico. I mean, we're dealing with it right now. They're producing a series called Dark Winds, based off Tony Hillerman books and calling it Native. I have had direct issues with people where I have called people out because of this issue, especially someplace like Swaya, Indian Market, when you are supposed to show your CDIB card to get into the festival, regardless of what medium you're in, meaning even the filmmakers. But when it all really comes down to it, it's all about who they know and how many of their enablers push them through. And I think that there's a huge group of people, especially in the PBS and documentary industry, who continue to make bank off of Native stories. Like we were just talking about that today on Facebook. Holt Hamilton has created an entire career around films made about Navajo people, and he's a white Mormon guy. And what I think the real problem is, at least around here in New Mexico, is that I think Natives are so desperate to be seen that they will let any fool with a camera come and film them. And that's why we've got all these non-Native people making films about our community and making films about, I mean, we have an entire production company here in New Mexico who is run by nothing but white filmmakers who have made nothing but films about Pueblo people. And the reality is those Pueblo people are letting them make those films. They're letting them into their communities and letting them tell these stories. And the same thing can be said for Holt Hamilton. He's telling all these Navajo stories, but there's Navajos that are wanting to be cast in it. Like Navajos want to be in those films. There's like a really big issue here on both sides. And it's like, well, how do we make sure that Native voices are being heard, that Native film festivals continue to be Native led, when we have so many different issues, like all of the issues, and it's internal in our own tribes. So I don't know where to start, but it's something I deal with like every day here.
It leads me to another point that I wanted to ask about, but does anybody else have anything else to add to this?
I think something that I hear a lot, that I get frustrated as a Native filmmaker, I'm also, Latina, is that you don't have the name to tell the story. And I get so frustrated about that. I just got this is like a conversation in my home. This is a conversation everywhere I go. I had the conversation about, Killers just came out. And I said, well, it would have been so much better if it was an Osage or a Native director that told that story, because I think it would have been a different perspective that we needed. And the comment that I got was, well, an up and coming Native director can't get a $200 million movie. And I said, well, a producer can get that. So I think Martin Scorsese could have been the producer and brought on a Native filmmaker. And it's really hard because in this industry, you have these like older filmmakers that have made their name, right, and are moving forward. And like, these are the people in studios that want to fund, and they never give us the opportunity to tell these stories because they don't give us a chance. And it gets really frustrating. And I don't really know what the solution is, but I know that as a filmmaker, if I continue telling my story, maybe I can get where I want to be. But yeah, that's the frustration, is like, oh, well, you don't have a big name, you're not recognized. And I'm like, well, I can tell stories. It's not hard. I know how to tell a good story, but no one gives me the chance. And if that, that's like my frustration, is like, well, you don't give them the chance, you don't give other Native people a chance to tell our stories, but you know, how would you know if we're good or not?
Exactly.
Yeah, I would completely echo that and say that I feel like, you know, it almost feels like the whole business in terms of the Hollywood side of things is getting more and more risk averse every day, financially. And so that goes hand in hand with perpetuating what Michelle was just talking about and saying, well, we're not going to give money to somebody that we don't trust. And how can we trust you? Because we don't know what you can do. And so it just keeps going down the cycle of giving money to the same people over and over again. And it takes somebody to actually take a risk to do that. And when they're being told by their bosses that we can't afford to do that right now, it gets harder for those decisions to be made.
Kind of want to echo again on what Sarah said. Is like the other thing I get frustrated is that there's these men, right, who make movies and sometimes they don't do well, but they still get money. So like, why can't you give us a chance? And maybe we don't do great, but we still have room to grow. That's the thing that I get tired all the time is like, well, if you fail, then you won't continue. But I'm like, well, there's big old directors who are continually failing and are continuing their careers, like, and they're growing. Why can't we do that?
I remember having this discussion with my friends about how The Rock has just continually failed upwards. So yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, there is a major frustration in that the system is very risk averse, and sometimes I blame, well, the whole franchise, ideology. Like you have to have, a marketable IP or something that appeals to nostalgia. Unfortunately for Native people, the appeal to nostalgia is like the historicization of Native people, both for Natives and for non-Natives. Like the historical Native seems to be the one we have the nostalgia for. And that sort of like bypasses all these ideas. And I've seen tons of great films about contemporary societies and issues. And that's very disheartening to see that. And the thing I was going to bring up was what something Ramona said about uh, how this is also internalized. Because I remember just recently, my tribe, the Northern Arapaho people, sort of approved the sequel. They approved Wind River 2, just like in the last year or so. And for tribes, I know for them, it's more along the lines of a business decision of, that movie was successful in some parts, so they're going to do it again to hopefully bring in some kind of, revenue. And at the same time say, hey, look, we're contemporaries too, but I think they haven't trusted, they don't have a trust, like Sarah and Michelle were saying about this idea of having a Native directing these things. What has been your experience in that sort of like that internalized space, if I can ask? Has there been ever pushback by communities to sort of the work you're doing?
Me? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think there's been pushback, of course, by those people who I try to, like I've tried to talk about those people, and I've actually confronted them. I confront them personally about what they're doing. And of course there's pushback. I was blacklisted in town for like 5 years. They actually called the local radio station and said that I was doing that because I was jealous and because my film didn't win. They actually went after me. And the other guy kind of, I call him out on his YouTube channel and on his Facebook channel or his Facebook page all the time, and ask him, why are you doing this? Like, why do you continue to make these films? And he actually like posted another one that he made. Like, you know what I mean? Like he used the fact that I was telling him not to do this to promote his film and to say, I just made another one. It's like, oh, you don't like that? I just made another one. Here it is. Here's the link to it. So Yeah, there's definitely pushback, and there are people that still don't talk to me because I said something about it, including the organization. The organization decided to completely eliminate the film category and said it was my fault because I was a sore loser. And for me, it's kind of like, well, you'd rather give the award to these rich filmmakers who are attorneys and all these other, they don't need the $500 prize that is given away by this organization. All of us poor independent filmmakers could use that $500.
Mhm.
These guys don't need it. They don't need the prestige. They have all this backing. They have all this. They don't need it. So, but everybody will call you a racist. You're racist. There's always that thing about, well, you're not bankable. Your name isn't bankable, so we can't hire you as a director because you're not bankable. You don't have name recognition. We can't make money off of your film because you're directing it. So there's a million different excuses, but yeah, that's something that that's something you kind of have to deal with if you want something to change. And a lot of people just decide not to say anything and just let it go. And I just can't stand that. I mean, those people know that what they're doing is wrong, but they continue to do it, and they continue almost to like rub our faces in it.
Sounds like it's geared by the money, the big
Yeah.
films get all the money, they can pay people. And I think that to some extent, it's like, okay, let's culture ourselves. Let's say these people do want to, like, everybody needs money, they will get paid, but at the same time, we can make our own films and, do it our own way, which means not as much money, and I think students these days, like, they have access to cameras and equipment where they can maybe not make a feature-length film, but you can make like videos and you can go and see these videos in different opportunities that are out there. Because I think, once you start telling people, showing people that you can do it this way and not have to go for the big name all the time, I think we can do it. It's just gonna take a lot of time. Let me use Curtis as an example. He was the big photographer, and I'm not anti-Curtis because I think his photos were really beautiful, but now Native people have their own cameras, they can have their own opportunities to create their photos and be in group exhibitions and show them. You don't even have to be in a group exhibition, you can just get your work out there. So to some extent, I think it's just about telling the filmmakers that are coming up now, like, we don't have to follow that path. We can make our own thing, show it to our own people, but it's going to take a long, long time because that money is, very nice. I don't know how nice it is. I'm just assuming it's nice. Yeah, but it's, so frustrating. I just saw a film called War Pony. I don't know if anybody knows that film, but it's there were two white women on the stage talking about this film they were presenting at the Charlottesville Film Festival. And I thought that film was horrible because it's shows Indian kids on the Pine Ridge Reserve, drinking, drugging. There's no parents inside at all. And I just thought, wow, this is pretty, it's a pretty horrible perspective of what life is like on the Pine Ridge Reserve. And, I just couldn't, I couldn't encourage that film or endorse it in any way. But I don't know enough about it to,
That reminded me of there was a PBS show, going back to PBS. There was a documentary called Chiefs. It was about the Wyoming Indian high school Chiefs and their run to state championship. And it was following these high school, Arapaho High School, and Eastern Shoshone students around for about a year or two, trying to navigate, life on the res versus, trying to win a high school championship. And I remember one of my instructors, he was a white fella, he said he knew the kids in the film, and because he was a sports announcer, and was sort of admonishing them for, why why are you allowing yourselves to be depicted this way. And it was very, I don't know, there could have been a nuanced conversation, but there's this idea that, this idea that the authority is of how we're represented is always continually taken out of our hands when when a non-native director takes the space. And but there's also some modicum, like we're talking about, of choice and within these communities to do these things. So there's this tightrope that native communities have to walk, I think, about how they choose to be depicted. And I understood that the because I sort of knew the kids too, and they decided that they wanted to be depicted the way they were. But this wasn't like a big money making documentary either. It was like just something that was aired on PBS maybe once or twice. And so we understand that this is sort of a trend of systematic replacement of natives in that spot. In your opinion, why does this continue to happen? I mean, we talked about the money, and is there something sort of like deeper or cultural that we can sort of like, hey, this is why continues to happen? Because I have my own opinions about why this happens, but I wanted to know if anybody else had thoughts of why do the Scorseses continually get the films, other than that they're a big name?
They own the world.
It's true. Well, I think there's an element of like consumerism and media literacy that goes into it too, right? Of like people have expectations of what movies are because of the movies that they've consumed their whole lives. And I think especially as people watch more and more media every day, they don't realize that some of those things are getting ingrained that are cultural, and that there are other stories and other ways of making movies, and therefore even as like a watcher, they're not necessarily trustful of something that looks slightly different than the normal perspective that they're watching every day.
I like that idea, this idea of expectation. I remember Philip Deloria's book, Indians in Unexpected Places, sort of covered the idea of why do people have these expectations of how natives are represented? And the first thing that pops in anybody's head is like sort of like the Plains Indian. Forgive me, I'm trying to stop using the word Indian, but it keeps popping out of my mouth. Any more thoughts on this?
I don't mind the word Indians.
Well, I think part of it too is the audience drives the economics, and the audience goes for a stereotypical understanding of indigeneity. Like, we have poor education system in the United States. It is just terrible system when it comes to indigenous understandings, and that kind of thinking drives people to look for Killers of the Flower Moon more than the next person that's coming up that's an amazingly talented filmmaker. And there can be some amazing female indigenous filmmakers out there that people aren't taking risk on, which they should. Like, what we'll do is, in colonial white society, they'll have one or two major native or anybody of color of different ethnic groups that they anoint, and everybody else gets left out because they've met the quota, and they don't always meet the quota with gender, and then they're done. And one of the issues is that even when these few examples of people are able to actually make something that's refreshing that we all celebrate, one of the problems is it doesn't continue, because they need to actually push that into other realms where they're funding mainstream contemporary thought with directors. And that's why I really love this film festival. As you can see, a whole series of native work where people are making work for their audiences, the audiences being their community. And they're beautiful films that are crossover. Like, anybody that watches, it doesn't have to be the community from that community to enjoy the film. But when you're able to actually watch a series of that you can see what the world's really missing with content and the actual distribution and all this stuff that's happening for Native filmmakers, is that we're being missed this opportunity where you can actually watch a series of this stuff out there. And I'm really excited about this film festival because you're able to actually see a whole series of what's happening in Native film from Native film directors and stuff like, Ramona's work is just amazing. I've got a lot of inspiration over her work over the years, and being able to see that kind of stuff in and we only have certain pockets, and for having a film festival saying that we matter for this kind of perspectives, making work for our communities and stuff, and then being able to see what other people make in it is, to me, like, the audience is one of the issues, is that people aren't funding things for our audiences. And even in Oklahoma, where we have a huge Native population, you don't find that in the media companies actually addressing that for mainstream society, because it's kind of a prejudiced system where they're not saying, hey, we really need more newscasters in film, and the film's own content should be on there. But we don't see that kind of work out there.
Anybody have anything else to add? Thanks for the plug there, Joe. But I do agree with that. There's it is deeply systemic, and my ideology of what what Native art is sort of runs counter to a lot of what Native artists think, and part of it does go into how we choose to represent ourselves. And there's that expectation of, like we said, the idea of what people think indigeneity is, and one of the things that I always commonly discuss is how much we learn our history through film. The best example I've always brought up in like presentations is Hidden Figures, right? Nobody knew about those African American women that basically built the space program until that movie came out, and that was despite the book being out for 20 years. And also despite the fact that those women were still alive when that film came out. So this idea that we learn a lot of our history through films, and I think that and since natives have been portrayed in a very specific I can't even say the word because it irks me so much. In a way that doesn't make us human for so long. That's sort of like the accepted and expected visage of Native people. We have issues in our own communities, that's true, but speaking as a collective of, or at least representations of a Native film community, what do you think are ways, and this can be your pie in the sky idea as well, like what do you think are ways that we can sort of like push back or counter these sort of trends? Because I'm genuinely interested. I have, like I said, I have my own ideas, but I want to hear what other communities have to say.
I wish we had a. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say, I think we need writers, people who will critically look at the work we're making and then write what they're seeing, write what they think about them, and not do it in a, this is bad, this is good sort of thing, but just have it delivered in such a way that people will take an interest in reading about the films or videos and then make an attempt to see them. And I think that, when I read something about a film, I get very interested in, and I do want to see it, and I pursue that. That's my
I'll make a
one
pitch to you
thought.
guys later. That just
Sure.
reminded me of something, Shelley. I'm going to make a pitch to you guys at the end of this. Joe, you were saying?
I would say that we really need more Native people in the decision making of what's being distributed and purchased and all of these in these big media companies. And these big media companies need to hire Native people from Native communities to curate some of this stuff coming in and to make sure that there is a platform for them to get the materials out there. This is from coast to coast, indigenous lands. And we are distinct people that really should be taken as a credible creators of content. And, you know, we're a small group, but this is something that, like, they're making films and money and, you know, on our lands. And they should take the time and make sure that we actually have the opportunity to have a voice in media. And I just think that, like, they should have a percentage and people from our communities making these decisions. Because one of the problems it has, I was talking to somebody from a big production company yesterday, and they were talking about a major animation thing, and the whole hierarchy of the person coming into that field and all of that were all white males, and they were all making decisions on things that were addressing of a piece. And I don't want to talk about it because it's not out yet, and I don't want to. But anyway, it was just like all these males in this major production company are making the decisions from the granular level. To come in, they'll assess it and all of that stuff. And that's one of the big problems we have, is we actually need to make sure that we're not just a producer on a film. And usually what they do is an associate producer, they give somebody a role. It used to be a consultant, and they give you a slightly better fee, but no more power. And then you get a little accolade, but you get no power to, like, change the fundamental problem with a script that was written by a white person, directed by white people, and then filmed and edited. And they hire like 3 Native people for the entire giant set. And they're like, oh, we addressed that. And we even have a producer. And then they're doing more interviews than they are doing work on the film. And this is one of the issues that we really need, is like, we need someone even above that in these roles to make bigger decisions, so that we actually have the opportunity to do it. But that's just my pie in the sky idea.
I think another idea is just being vocal about the things that are coming on the screen and saying, hey, that is not an accurate portrayal of us. Also, I think letting people know that we're all diverse. I think that's something growing up, is having people realize that we're not all the same. And so I think that's one way, speaking up, educating people about who we are, also just making films and letting them go out there. Because I think that's the way we're going to change this, is we're going to keep making films, keep finding ways to get into these industries. I think those are ways that I hope, to change it. It's not going to be like really fast. It's going to take time. And I think that's what kind of sucks, is it takes time. But I think we'll be able to change it, hopefully.
I think I just kind of gave up, like, because I I just got sick and tired of telling everybody all the time, and it seemed like I had to be Debbie Downer like all the time, and it's not easy being Debbie Downer, and people get pissed at you after a while. I was like, why can't you just let them make their films, and why can't you just leave them alone, or whatever it is, or they give back to their communities, or they always have some kind of excuse as to why what they're doing is okay. And I just kind of give up. And I think, kind of getting blacklisted like I did really helped me to just not want to do it. I'm really even considering not making films anymore, because I am just tired of it. I'm tired of arguing. I'm tired of fighting for the same 10 grants that all of us fight over every year. And I'm just burnt out. I think I'm burnt out. And also I think having to do everything for so long, I mean, run the camera, edit, all of it, raise the money. I'm just done. Like, I did that for 30 years. I'm like, all right, I'm done. So I've kind of taken, even though I have to finish these projects, which I will finish, I've kind of taken the approach where on a local level, I am advocating for our younger filmmakers. For me, that seems to be like the only way, at least locally, for me to advocate and to legislatively go in front of our governor and ask for funding for independent filmmakers, create programs for younger people so that they can get smaller grants to make their short films, to get their career started. Trying to hire young Native filmmakers to work with me so that they have PBS credits on their resume, so that they have all the superficial requirements that the outside media world needs to think that you're a good filmmaker. I mean, whatever I need to do to further that journey for them, I try to do. Okay. But like pie in the sky here in New Mexico, there are so many things that could be done. And I work with the Governor's Council. I try and I argue with, I'm the like one of the only Native people on the Governor's Council, and it's like pulling teeth trying to get things done and get things for Native filmmakers here. And we have a lot of Native filmmakers that come from New Mexico, a lot. And they just don't have the support. So that's, for me, that's where I see it. We've got a school that's starting supposedly here in New Mexico that are going to start training people to do, below the line work on film industry stuff. But for me, it's always been, that's great. We've always need a below the line workers, but we need to be facilitating above the line support for filmmakers, people who are going to direct and produce and write and be that part of the process. And so that's been what I've been trying to do as of late, just because I can't deal with these people anymore. I'm just sick of it. And and unfortunately, even in our own Native funding communities in places like the Sundance Native Lab, in places that have been around for many years, they're just as crooked as tribal council. Like, we all know that they help, these organizations have their chosen few that they pick and they help all time every year, and we see them always get the funding and we see it all happen. And so there needs to be a completely level playing ground and an organization or a distribution, just like Joseph was saying. It's like, that's what we need: people who are in executive posts, people who are at the head of programs to do this work, and not the same people that have been running it for the last 30 years, like new people who are not going to play favorites, who are going to take people on. If somebody works their ass off for years and they're doing good work, and that's the criteria to support them. Not that you think that they're billable or that they're cute or that you think you can make money off of their work. It's about what the work that they do. And also, as Native communities, what they give back to their communities. It should be also an essential thing. That should be a requirement. That should be an unsaid thing that just happens. If you're making these films in these communities, then you need to give back to that community. And as Indigenous people, that's how it should be. So that's the criteria. That's how you know that, that it's going to make a change, that things are going to happen. And, that's what I look towards. Like, how do we push more people out there? How do we support them? And how do we make it easier for them than it was for us? Because it's not, as I get older, I realize that it's not going to get any easier for me. As I get older in the media and the whole sphere of media making, it's harder. It's not only harder to make the films physically, but it's also harder to bank yourself, and it's a tough industry to be in. And I've just found I'm gonna have to start teaching, like Joseph says. It's time to start teaching or something, because like filmmaking right now is just for the birds, man, for me. And everybody else, I'm glad that they still have hope and that they're going to continue to move forward and do this stuff. And I'm here to lend a hand to that. But yeah, I've really lost any hope of of moving forward in that way. Yeah.
Well, we're here to support you, Ramona, as much as we can. Just know that. That it does connect to all these other issues, like you were saying, right? There's these internalized things of expectations from Native people ourselves to the expectations of white audiences and the financiers. How else does this sort of like this? To me, it's this idea that it's all well and good that the stories are being told, but then the authority over our own culture and how we're represented is always being taken out of our own hands. And that's something I really, sometimes it frustrates me, because I really can't get even like the smart Native people that I know to understand that. The idea that we should have this authority over our own culture and our own stories, or even how we are represented and how we represent ourselves. and it does sort of veer off into the idea that, you know, it's got Native actors in it and it's got Native consultants on it, and that's enough. But to me, the Native consultancy was always been, you know, like a lotto theory, right? You know, just because it worked for you, it isn't going to work for everything. So let me see where we're at here. Other issues connected to this. You did bring up something that I wanted to sort of like get everybody's opinion on, about the idea of how did it go? I thought I had it written down. This idea for advocating for one another. It's I think it's a steep hill to climb in some senses, but that's sort of like the impetus. The idea behind the film festival was the idea that, you know, these up and coming filmmakers could at least have a film festival listing on their films, and that was sort of like push them to be able accepted into other filmmaker or film festivals. And that's why we were sort of like about, it's not necessarily about genre or, you know, specific representations. Just like, can we help a Native filmmaker like take another step? And one of my great inspirations behind the film festival is Madonna Thunderhawk. And she wrote this great piece in The Revolution Will Not Be Funded about WARN, women of, you know, all red nations, and what they were doing during the 74, 73 Wounded Knee, and the idea that, you know, they had the means to do stuff that they didn't really ask for permission, not even from, you know, AIM or the men of AIM. They just went out and tried to do what they could. And that was sort of like, that's the thread that runs behind, one, my own filmmaking, and two, the idea of the film festival is like, we have the means to do this. How many Native filmmakers can we sort of like promote? So again, any sort of like thoughts and any more, because there's this idea that, you know, Killers of the Flower Moon is not critic proof because it has Native, you know, representation in it. Again, what are your thoughts about how these things come about? You know, I guess I'm just looking for general ideas of what your thoughts are on this whole topic in general.
I think that Killers of the Flower Moon was destined to not work in the beginning. It was from the beginning, it wasn't a Native film because they chose to make that film about that book that was written by a white guy about the FBI investigating, nothing to do about the Osage. It's about white dudes investigating their own crap in that, their own involvement in it. That's what it's about. So the fact that there's even Osage people in that movie at all is surprising. And they did make efforts to try to change the narrative of that. But it's just like Dark Winds. It doesn't matter. They can change whatever narrative they want, but the source material comes from a white guy. If they wanted to make a movie about what happened to the Osage people, they would have, you know, looked at Linda Hogan's book, you know, Mean Spirit, or they would have gone to an Osage written story and done the film from that perspective. Then it would have been a real film about the Osage people, but instead it's a Scorsese film about white men killing Osage people, which is exactly what it is. And given Scorsese's history, we shouldn't be surprised by that. That's his MO, right? That's what he makes films about, you know, and it's not surprising to me, and we shouldn't expect it to be anything but what that source material was. So, like I say, like everybody's got their opinion about it, but still it's problematic from the start. And that's has a lot that says a lot about how people are still getting their historical narratives about Indigenous people from white people.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
and
a
I think
clear
you
and
bring
total
up
example.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ramona. Like the whole, like even the way they promote it as, oh my gosh, the Osage were so wealthy. Like that's a white perspective of wealth. And this fundamental concept is that Osage were losing so much stuff. They had Cherokees pushed on their land. They had all this stuff going on. The land base was shrinking up, and then this happens. This wasn't an exciting moment of wealth in an Osage wealth idea. Like they were constantly losing stuff, like value stuff in this. And if you don't get the Osage perspective of what wealth really is, then you don't really understand that film, because wealth of economic wealth is a colonial construct of this value. And that is what the story is really about. This, oh my God, can you imagine being that rich economically? Like that is the story. And that's a white perspective from the very central of it. Look, oh my God, there's richest Indians, we've ever heard of. And that's the story that's in the trailer. That's the story of this concept. And that's why they won't understand our communities and they won't understand our thinking until they understand the perspective of that. And you really can't get that unless you are from a community with it. And I really liked what Ramona said earlier about the idea of like so many wonderful filmmakers over the years. Many of them have, not heard of very frequently, that are Native, that do give back to the community. They give training, they hire people on set, and it's like we're running on shoestring budgets, and we're doing whatever we can to help out, to make it another piece in the language or doing something like that. And I just think it's really important those perspectives are. And I think for people that listen to us as Native people talking about film, it is in that perspective that we're talking about is the importance of these Indigenous value systems that make our stories valuable to us, that they need to learn from. And that's where I think that, that movie will not be successful in that sense.
Well, even in like the context of getting funding, at least when you're going through the PBS system, when you're applying for things like ITVS or the humanities grants or any of that stuff, you get like vetted and then you get questioned. And a lot of the things that I think are really problematic about that at the very source, like where you go get your money from, is that they already have a preconceived notion of what they want to see, what they see us as, which is like, i.e. poverty porn. And they have to see us dig into the dirt before we can dig ourselves out. They don't understand that some of us might tell stories in a circle, that we won't tell a linear story like they say should be used as a documentary force. You have to follow this certain thing. You have to have a moment of despair, and there's got to be some kind of conflict in order for you to tell your story. And they don't understand that Indigenous people might have a different concept of how they're going to talk about a story or how their storyline is going to develop, or the fact that they don't need to have tragedy or poverty in their story in order to get their point across. That's something that they at the very core don't understand. So when you go and you apply for funding and they tell you, oh, well, we don't like your edit because it doesn't follow that narrative structure, or we don't like the way that you have not used. What about alcoholism? Isn't that an issue in the community? And it's like, well, why do we have to talk about that? You obviously know it's an issue, so why should we make it a part of our narrative for you? And it's kind of like, well, yeah, if you want money, you'll change your edit and your storyline so that we get that nugget that we want. We get that darkness, that poverty, that thing, that so we find your story more emotionally compelling. And I mean, that is a real problem. And even though they talk up their new requirements for funding, and they say that we're being more inclusive, we're looking at what different ways of storytelling, we're trying to refigure the way we gauge films for funding, they still have this underlying thing that they want. I mean, they'd rather just have Ken Burns tell your story. Right? That's in a nutshell, they'd rather just have that because he follows their arc. He brings in all the white photographers to show your history. that's what they want. So when you give them something else, they're kind of like, well, we can't fund that. People won't watch that. People aren't going to understand that. And that's the problem. I mean, at least as a documentary filmmaker, maybe narrative filmmakers have it easier, but I don't think so. That's still the underlying problem, is that there's a certain thing that these funders and these people and who are in charge expect and will insist to get in order for you to get funding. So I don't know how to change that, except like Joseph said, having those people who make the decisions at the helm. And so they understand, oh, well, they're not telling the story the way you want because they come from this community and that's not how they tell stories like in their community. There's nobody like that in public media, and there's nobody like that in most major studios. So people don't understand that. They want to see that, you know, I can't even say his name. Mr. Yellowstone, you know, they'd rather have him tell our stories because he's following that narrative arc and that stereotypical view of who we are. And so I don't know.
I agree with that, because I remember seeing this headline about Yellowstone, and he has actually quoted in the headline saying, yeah, these are my stories to tell. He basically said that. And that's go ahead, Michelle.
Well, he straight up said that he was our savior, and I was like, you're our savior? I don't think so. And I think, Ramona, like what you said is, I feel like Hollywood wants to see our trauma, and I don't want to see our trauma. We already know our trauma. We're already healing from it. I want to see joy. Like, we are joyous people. We're funny people. And I don't understand why we can't see that. Well, actually I do, because it doesn't make Hollywood money, right? And I'm like, how do you know it doesn't make you money? You haven't made it. Like, you haven't shown people. And I would tell you right now, it makes so much money. I mean, I think it would make money. But yeah, I think I get frustrated. And I guess my fear with Flowers is that if this movie does well, it's going to lead to more trauma crimes. And that's what I'm scared of. And I've told so many people this, and, you know, they tell me, hey, be quiet. Like, everyone says you don't want to get blacklisted. And I'm like, well, why? Why do I want to see more trauma on screen? And why do I want people to learn about this trauma as if we're like in the past? That's the other thing, is this constant, we're in the past. And I'm like, we're not. I mean, we're here at this panel, right? We're all here. We're all Native. And so I don't know. I get frustrated all the time because I don't know what the solution is. I don't know what to do. I know that I can make stuff to showcase like who I am, but like, how do we stop it? I guess that's my question, is like, how do we prevent this from continuing?
Yeah, I agree. That's incredible things you're saying, and I really enjoy hearing you guys say these things. It just reminds me of like the media that's out there that's popular, that is native created, is like, it becomes like this haven for, they have to like bring in everybody as well. You know, for me, that was one of the issues of Reservation Dogs, is like they had to bring in everybody, and sometimes that was like inconsistent in the storytelling. But one of the pie in the sky ideas for the First Nations Film and Video Festival is like, this is like a 10-year plan thing. And this is, I've been sort of like talking about it more and more. Is like, we want to be sort of like a distributor of Native films at some point, sort of on the line of the Criterion Collection, where it's cultivated or curated, and sort of like put on streaming devices. And, you know, if we can afford to do like home media sort of hard copy sort of things, that's sort of like the idea that I wanted to steer the film festival into as well, besides having the festival component, but sort of like this being a distributor here in the US of Indigenous films from all over the Western Hemisphere, because we see so many different films. And I think what Joseph said earlier about no matter where it comes from, what tribe it comes from, there's a commonality to a lot of it, even though there's vast differences, you know. And I don't think enough people see that. But we're coming up on an hour. Any more thoughts or closing thoughts on this idea? I mean, it's frustrating to be sure, but I think having a conversation like this does open up some thoughts and some ideas. Um,
Yeah, I was just gonna say one thing that I'm like literally always simultaneously frustrated and hopeful about is that idea that Ramona brought up earlier of there's this just massive assumption that there is a way to tell a story in movies, that places like, you know, I'm a professor at a university, like I'm very used to what the academic version of what filmmaking is perpetuates, and it comes from one very specific white history. And so I think as much as powerful that as that is, I think the opposite is also powerful, in that we all know that even if you aren't part of that culture, you can learn something from consuming the stories of that culture, and you can still enjoy it and figure out some meaning in it. And so the opposite is also true. There's no reason why we can't tell our stories with our value systems the way that Joseph was talking about, and anybody around the world can still watch it and understand it, even though they have a different understanding of it. And so for me, it's one of those things that is literally always going to be frustrating and hopeful all at the same time, about what is and what could possibly be with Native movies, I think.
Yeah, sometimes I think like advice I have is, if you're non-native, really think about if that's your story to tell. And if it's not, find the people that it is. And you know, being white, kind of being a white male leads you kind of in the door, right? It's common in this industry. So if you have that ability, is being that lead by saying, hey, I want to fund this movie, let me give it to you, like to a native director, from Making Sense, but be an ally to us, like find a way to put us in those rooms, to put us in those doors, speak our names. And then also as a native filmmaker, hire native people, so that, you know, I always tell my friends, where I go, you go. We all work together, right? A lot of us are native in my for a group, and I'm like, where I go, you go. I want to take you there. And I think also the other thing, sorry, I'm like talking a lot. The other thing is that I think it's the young, Ramona, like you said, the younger generation is going to change this, because, you know, you have these old people in this industry that unfortunately are not going to be here forever. And I think if we teach these young people this mindset, I'm really hopeful for this next generation, but if we teach them this mindset, I think they're the ones who are going to change it. And so that's what I'm really hopeful. That's why I'm like kind of passionate. I know it's going to change. I just don't know when. And I know it's going to take time. And it's all of us teaching these young people how to do this and how to change and what we say and what we don't like. And so that's why I'm hopeful, because I know it's going to happen. It just sucks that it's going to take forever, but I know it's going to happen because it has to.
any other closing thoughts?
Well, I really enjoyed listening to everybody. I work in isolation, and you know, you're working away on your scripts and everything. But it's really great to hear everybody, because it just informs me that, you know, I hope I'm going in the right direction. So it's really great.
One of the big things that I would always try to do with my own filmmaking is like try to make it like a community art piece. And that was where I was trying to steer this film I was making on Hamlet, or about Hamlet, or an adaptation of Hamlet. And it was really going very well, where community people would just show up and do their part and participate. And so hopefully, I hope that, you know, filmmaking looks a little bit more like that in the future. I agree with what Michelle says and what Ramona says, that the next generation are going to be the change makers, but I always feel crappy that we left the world for them, that they have to work to change. And I remember, like, in high school and in grade school being told, you're going to be the one that changes the world. and and then I don't want to tell the next generation that. I want to give them the tools to be able to, like, continue the changes that we're making, because I think all of us right here on this panel are making changes. And we shouldn't belittle ourselves. And I'm very proud of all of you for everything you've done, and mainly because you guys are a voice behind the camera. And I've said this more places than once, you know, white saviors can exist behind the camera. And the reason why you don't see the wolf in the picture is because the wolf is taking the picture, right? Is running the camera, to play off the Killer of the Flower Moon trailer. Um, So I want to thank you all again for everything you've put forward to the film festival. I look forward to all your future works. If you want, you can tell us what you're up to next, or if you don't have to. But let's give some well wishes right now for everybody.
I guess I can do it. I usually don't because it's hard, but I'm trying to practice. So I actually am working on a feature doc about Badawat, which is our river in Humboldt County, and we're in the process of trying to change its name to Badawat because right now it's known as Mad River. So I'm working on that. And I just finished up on a short doc called Towa about my tribe receiving our island back. We're the first in the United States to receive land back. So it's really awesome to do that and to tell our tribe story. And I'm working on a sci-fi right now that I'm hoping to shoot, I don't know, next year. And I'm working on a horror or producing a horror right now. But yeah, those are kind of the things I'm doing. But yeah.
I guess I can go. I've got a music video that I'm just finishing up right now. It's a collaboration between myself, my brother, and one of my good friends who's a Haitian American performer. And so we sort of worked on the story together to develop about levels of disconnect from culture and trying to look back and reconnect to people who have been disconnected from you. And then I have a couple of different features that are in development right now that I hope can sort of get off the ground in the next couple of years. One of them's a horror, and one of them seems to be a horror but kind of ends up being something else.
Well, I told you guys I'm working on finishing up these 4 documentary projects. I have 1 docuseries, and my husband's working on a film that I'm helping him edit. I'm trying to finish that, and then we've got 2 more docs that we are in various stages of doing. But I'm trying, like I said, to transition of doing that stuff. And so I've got my first novel there. I won't believe it until I see it because I know better, but they're supposedly turning it into a TV series. And yeah, so I have to do the 2nd book and the 3rd. So I'm kind of like trying to like wean myself off of doing video projects and taking less and less. And I've cut my client list down quite a bit, and I just stopped doing some of that work. So I'm getting ready to transition into more writing duties and doing that kind of stuff, and moving that way. So that's it. I'm really excited for everybody though. It sounds like you guys are doing some cool stuff.
Joe or Shelley?
I'm working on a script right now about a really well-known Canadian artist, and I'm a little bit reluctant because to say who it is, because we still have to get rights to his paintings and rights from his family, all that kind of stuff. But I didn't want to go down the same, like do a biography on him. He was known for his drug use, his alcoholism, and I was kind of thinking, well, I didn't want to focus on that. But then the more I learn about what he does and how he did it, the alcohol is really a part of it, but it's, I have to figure out a way to bring it in without making it such a detrimental aspect of his life. So that's what I'm doing.
And I'm working on a series, and I've got funding for episode 2 and 3. Episode 1's in the film festival of rabbit stories, and they're all in Cherokee, and gives me great hope with the Koreans having such popularity of making stuff for mainstream stuff in the language. So I'm, for all these 20 something years, I've always made things in Cherokee language. And so I'm excited about that, being more mainstream, to have something in other languages. And then I'm working on a documentary about Cherokee Little Seeds, 0 to 5 language program, and a narrative short about AI in Native communities, kind of a fictional version of that. And that'll all be in the language as well. It's a live action short. And then, but yeah, there's a few things coming up in the next 8 months. So
I appreciate you all sharing, and thank you. What's coming up for the festival again is we have our spring festival in May. And I wanted to invite sort of like we launched our website, and on it we were trying to do sort of like more movie reviews or more movie critique. And I would like to invite each and every one of you to sort of like, if you want, to sort of contribute a piece to our website, to sort of like something we can curate into, so that people can start to learn about Native critique from a Native perspective. Again, there's no like deadline, and I'm not going to like pound you over the head knocking on your door asking for it, but you're all invited. If you wanted to submit something, just hit me up on the emails, and well, we can work something out. And I really appreciate everything that you're doing. Like I said before, I'm proud of all of you. My own filmmaking is very, very stalled right now because I'm still running into the same issues of trying to find funding for things. And I'm actually personally I'm writing a second novel. It's about the lone survivor of a pandemic, who just happens to be Arapaho. Those are the things that are happening. What's coming up for this series? We have a lot of topics that we wanted to talk about. I wanted to do a part 2 of the other 51% with Native women directors, mainly because I love highlighting your voices, and just to talk about more again the issues of what's happening. The idea of another topic is the idea of self-sabotage, of how are we sort of like doing it to ourselves in some respects. And then there was the Conqueror's Remorse Part 1, which was when natives say no. But this is, I think, fills that gap a little bit better. And the last one we want to do is it's called Not N-Word Enough. And that word is Native, and it's about the Afro-Indigenous experience in the communities. So I'm really looking forward to try to put that one together. So that's what's coming up for us. Again, I want to thank you all, Sarah, Michelle, Shelley, Ramona, Joseph. Thank you for your time, especially, and most importantly, thank you for your work and your voice. There would be no film festival without any of you. And I truly do mean that. We'll close out the recording here. Thanks the audiences, the people who did show up to get in on this discussion. Look for an edited version of this in about 2 or 3 weeks, and it will be posted on our website and we'll be shared on the socials. And again, thank you very much, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Ernie. Bye, everybody.
What